Well, let's find out, guys. Why does no one care about my characters? Notes on bad characters. Boom. I mean, that's fine, Book. I mean, that's fine, Muffin. You did good.
Your character, they're gonna hate your...
I think you can take out the collab part with me. We doing stuff.
book. In this video, we're gonna cover the 7 most common reasons why you might have written a character that nobody's gonna care about. And then I'm going to tell you ways to fix those mistakes. And the very first reason is you've written an easy path character.
Works for me. I mean, it is true. It's true. You've written an easy path character.
Readers don't like characters who don't have to work hard. When the
Characters that don't have to work hard. Gotta do some editing homework in a bit. Yep, no worries.
Force Awakens came out, there was a huge backlash against Rey. And at first I was confused because I thought, like, is she
I need
really
to stay on
that
path for January.
unlikable? But then I realized
True.
people hate her because they feel like she has unearned successes. She masters these complex Force abilities without kind of any training at all. And she defeats one of the most expert trained warriors in the entire galaxy, Kylo Ren, with 0 practice. And then another place, because the plot requires it, she gains instant piloting skills. Effortlessly successful characters are hard to care about because 1, it doesn't mirror our own lives, and then 2, we kind of disbelieve that they're real human beings. They seem more like a Mary Sue than a real human. Now, compare that to all the effort that Luke Skywalker had to put in to master the Force. He had to practice with Yoda on Dagobah, he had to practice blindfolded on the Millennium Falcon, and there was a lot of failure, a lot of failure
Good
before
luck,
he
Book.
finally succeeded.
I'm gonna chill for a
pro
bit.
tip for you
Okay,
writers,
see you
the
next
harder
time.
you have your
Doesn't
character
mirror
work,
our
and
own
the
lives.
more
I don't
they
know.
fail, the
I
more the
succeed
reader's
pretty
going to
much
like.
effortlessly.
By the way, I have been writing a script for a new course in Bookfox Academy. It's going to be about characters, and it's going to be absolutely brilliant. So if you subscribe now, you'll not only get the 10 courses I already have up, but you'll get the new ones that come out over the course
That's
of the
me
next
and
year.
TM.
As always, link is in the description. Check it out. The second point is one that not a lot of authors think about. It is number 2. You've written an author projection.
Ooh, author projection character. Fuck you, Muffin. Have a good night, good sir. Take care.
Character. Now, there's not a problem with having your character being based on yourself. It's when the reader can really tell that the character is just sort of a smokescreen for the author. And let me give you 2 quick examples of this. The first one is just with kind of a whiny character. Sally Rooney is a famous young female writer. And in Beautiful World, Where Are You? Her main character is also a famous female young writer. But the trouble is that this character constantly complains about the perils of being rich and famous. And after a while, I was just like, shut up. Just shut up. Shut up. Shut up. I don't want to hear you complain anymore. It's not that bad to be rich and famous. But here's the trouble. I wasn't reacting to the character. I was reacting because I knew this was just the author using this character as a mouthpiece. A second example, and this happens all the time, is wish fulfillment, where the reader can tell that the author has just written this character to sort of like get their jollies on because this is what the author really wants. Paul Auster wrote Sunset Park, and in that book, he has a character who has all sorts of deviant dalliances with a 17-year-old Puerto Rican woman. And as I was reading it, I was like, this doesn't feel like this is what the character wants. It feels like the author's just having fun with wish fulfillment in this novel. The characters weren't
That's
real
pretty bad.
characters. They just became props for the author.
You can get around the self-insert problem pretty easily by doing an identity swap and having them genuinely act like they have that identity. True, but that means you're just you're good at writing. But he's just talking about like just bad characters in general.
author's desire. So what you have to do is just get some distance between yourself and your characters so they're not just transparent reflections of what you want as an author. Now, this third mistake is probably the one that I see most often as an editor. It is number 3, you've written a character missing an interior life.
Okay. Character missing interior life.
So why is this so common? I think it's so common
because
we're all trained on movies, right? And movies are not a medium which allows for a lot of inner reflection and thought. No, movies are about action, right? It's about external action. So when writers have been trained on external action and then they move to the novel, which requires a lot more of interiority, they often don't know what to do. So as you're writing, you should be consciously working on, how do I get more interiority into this scene? How do I peer more into my character's brains? And a good test for this is simply to ask yourself, do I have a paragraph in the first chapter, say, that is 100% character thoughts? And for an example of this, let's look at The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. This is a teenager who has cancer, and she's going to these support groups with other teenagers who have cancer. And we're getting sort of her unmediated thoughts in this paragraph. One, it's sort of darkly funny. She's viewing cancer sort of a competitive sport, like she just has to outlast for these other people, and then she'll be the 20% that actually survives. But something else to notice in this paragraph is that she's being irrational, and she knows she's being irrational. Both the darkly funny and being self-aware give us this insight into her as a character and makes us like her more. We feel more intimate with her as readers. Now, the next reason why readers might not care about your character is number 4, you've written a plot.
Ooh. That's bad. No plot device.
If your reader sense that this character is not a real flesh and blood human, but merely a device to forward your plot, they're not going to invest emotionally in that character. So let me give you 3 examples of characters who are mere plot devices rather than real characters. The first one is what I call the MacGuffin character. These are people who exist merely to be protected or saved, but they don't really have any agency or choices or even any personality in your story. A great example of this would be in the very first Taken, where the daughter is pretty much a MacGuffin character. She exists in the story to give Liam Neeson someone to save. And this is a little irony I always found weird, is that the narrative treats her as an object just as much as the traffickers treat her as an object. Think about that one for a second. The second plot device character.
My gift sub just lapsed. Now I'll have to see the ads. Oh no, Sean! I was gonna mention, sometimes you meet a character and you know exactly when they're going to die before they're anywhere close to that scene. Yup. Exposition fairy. Only there for exposition dumps.
Is what I like to call an exposition fairy. These are characters whose only purpose is just to give information or background. That's really their only role. And these type of characters are so often that actually in Austin Powers, they created a character to make fun of these type of characters, and they named him Basil Exposition. Ideally, if you have to give complex ideas or information to the reader, you will have someone deliver it who matters in the story in some way, not just some sort of rando that then disappears. And the third type of plot device characters are, and you might have seen this coming, red shirts. This comes from the crew members in Star Trek who wore red shirts and were somehow always killed in the very first scene to provide a sense of danger to the main characters. So just beware.
Yeah, the first chapter, every single one of the characters in the first chapter, aside from Husai, are all red shirts.
Writing your own novel, whether you are creating characters that you're just planning to kill off a chapter later. Compare that to the way that Game of Thrones killed off characters. George R.R. Martin made sure you loved a character, like you really loved them before slaughtering them. Martin is basically the anti-red shirt author. He only kills people you care deeply about. And by the way, if you've read of a MacGuffin character or an exposition fairy or a red shirt, please comment with it in the description below. I always say the more examples, the merrier. Well, I've actually never said that, but you know, it's a good...
Stormtroopers versus original series red shirts. What happens? Stormtroopers miss every shot and the red shirts still die anyways. Tripping and falling. Pretty sure a lot of background characters die in Game of Thrones. Well, I mean, look at Daenerys. Every single person on Daenerys' side dies. Like when she has to, like, run away from Meereen. It's like she loses basically everyone, and she has to start from scratch again. And go straight back to the Dothraki.
Phrase to live by. This next mistake is absolutely key to remember. It's number 5. You've written a
character with low stakes. Or few stakes.
Character with low stakes. If your character fails, what happens? If there's not that big of a tragedy, if they're just, say, losing a job or not getting into like their ideal college, then there's not enough at stake for the reader to care about your character. Here is your mission, if you should choose to accept it. You want at least 4 levels of stakes for each one of your characters. And to illustrate these 4 levels, we're going to look at Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, specifically Frodo. The first level of stakes for Frodo is the
global existential stakes. That would be anima.
Is global existential stakes. If Sauron regains the One Ring, all of Middle-earth will be destroyed. The second level of stakes is more community.
Community group stakes. Exile from the tree.
Or group stakes. You have Gondor facing immediate defeat. You see the elves, their power start to wane. You see Saruman start to corrupt the Shire. And then the third level of stakes for Frodo are the personal
external stakes. Because, like, close friends. Is this like temporal suffering? I'm not sure what you mean, Levi.
external stakes. By carrying the ring into Mordor, he is risking his life and limb. He might be eaten by Shelob. He might be killed by the orcs. But don't forget about the fourth level of stakes, which are his internal or psychological.
Internal psychological stakes. Why is he human?
Stakes. Frodo is battling the corruption of the ring, and he really fears turning into someone like Gollum. The question he's asking himself.
Yeah, temporal suffering. It's the suffering that temporally constrained. That's temporally constrained. When I think of temporal, I think of timeline, so I'm not sure what you mean by, like, temporal suffering. Like, within a specific timeline? Constrained in time. Like, stuck in time? I don't understand where this comes from, Levi. Like, you die and then that's it. I'm not connecting the dots here, bro.
Is,
sorry.
Will I lose myself by going on this
suffering
journey?
That's drawn out, not over and done with? Yeah, like, I'm confused, Sean. I'm not quite sure what Levi's trying to say.
So ask yourself whether the stakes are too low for your character, or ask yourself whether you simply don't have enough stakes for your character. It's really hard to write a good character with only one thing at stake. Okay, now it's time for the sixth reason why readers might not care about your character. It is...
I gotta figure out how to word it.
you've told us about.
Uh-oh.
Character. You might know from watching my other videos that I am not the guy that's like, all show, don't tell. I feel like that's very elementary level advice. But in this case, I want to point out that there's sometimes a difference.
Makes more sense when you understand it from the Christian perspective. Okay, enlighten me, Levi. I still don't understand what the original topic... Like, you said something was like temporal suffering, and I don't know what you were referring to when you made that comment. So I don't know what the topic of this is, like, in context referring to.
Difference between what the author is telling us about a character and how the reader...
The emotional external stakes. Of specifically Frodo? Or just stakes, like, of those kind in general? And I still don't see how you get to temporal suffering from that.
perceives that character. One problematic issue with telling, which is something that I see really frequently as an editor, is when the author is telling us, oh, this character, they're super smart. But then there's nothing actually shown in the narrative that convinces us that character is smart. If you're gonna have a super smart character, you have to be smart enough.
Because those stakes are constrained to the life of the person undergoing them. They don't extend in time beyond that. Hair transplant. True, Dreamy Bloody. We all need one. I'll need one eventually. I get what you're saying, Levi, but I just don't understand why you would word it that way. Like, I'm just not connecting the dots between what you're saying.
To give them actions that convince us they're smart.
Look at the future and look cool on video, but they don't do facial harmonization. People want to live in the future and look cool on video, but they don't do facial harmonization.
Another example that I see really frequently as an editor is a disconnect in morality. I edited a book where a character was a pretty decent, likable guy, and then out of the blue, he shoots an innocent person in the back. And I had to point out the discrepancy between how that character was portrayed before versus what he did in this moment that was extremely confusing and antithetical to who he was as a person. And in a situation like that, you have two choices. One, you can go back and revise, so shooting a man in the back is in that character's character. Or two, you can highlight this action as a radical departure.
It's the closest idea that I regularly encounter. But I still, like, okay, so I guess the best way to say it, Levi, is I understand what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying, but, like, I don't understand how that's extrapolatable in any way that's relevant. Like, obviously, like, the idea of, like, the suffering and the external stakes themselves aren't a physical thing for those coaches of writing who have never written a book. It's how I'm relating to the idea of external dread, like external stakes.
For this character. He is changing into someone else. Now, for the 7th point, I kept it as last because I feel like it's one of the biggest pitfalls that...
I think Dreamy Bloody is a, how do you say it? It's all in how you say it, right? Like, if you're being arrogant and talking down to someone, that's different. But I think you should take the audience's view very seriously, because they're the ones you're aiming for. And if you don't try to go out of your way to please your audience, then, like, what are you doing? Right? You should always be trying to go out of your way to figure out what is the best thing that your audience wants, and then provide that. And then accumulate people in the category that like that, and that's how you build an audience. It's that thing you do where you don't have the term already in your vocabulary, so you use a similar term you're familiar with. Like existential dread of dying is only relatable to the character until they die. I mean, it just seems so obvious, it doesn't seem like something you should even need to say.
Authors can fall into. So for number 7, we're looking at, you haven't justified.
Justifying negative traits. Such as, this would be like, size, lack of action due to overthinking, causing him to be a bad leader in situations that happen very fast. He's not a quick thinker. I mean, he's a quick thinker, but he's not a quick decision maker. He needs to get all the variables together and make sure that his decision is solid. So that's why it's important that he has a second in command that makes decisions quickly, and then he can adjust those decisions later. But basically the pact is that he doesn't, unless it's like extremely needed to happen, right? But he doesn't reprimand the wrong decision, for instance, if he thinks it's the wrong decision at the time, because he would have made no decision. And unless no decision was the best decision to make, yeah.
Negative traits. But some authors forget to justify negative traits. They just have characters doing really evil things, and there's no reason or explanation why. I think most of the time, your goal should be to create an ounce of sympathy for the character. Maybe not a gallon of sympathy, but just an ounce, so we understand in some way why they're doing what they're doing. So let's look at some examples of this. In Dexter, yes, he is a serial killer, but he abides by a code to only kill evil people. So obviously a huge negative trait, but there's a motivation behind it, which is good. In Forrest Gump, Jenny takes advantage of Forrest, she runs away from him, like she treats him very badly. But when we understand her backstory of the way that she was abused by her father, we're much more sympathetic toward her wrong decisions. Now let's look at a book like Toni Morrison's Beloved. Sadly, isn't a great mother to Denver, right? That is a character flaw of hers. But as we learn how she had to kill her other child in order to prevent that child from being enslaved, we have an enormous amount of sympathy for her shortcomings. But there are two very important warnings I have if you use this technique. One is beware of over-justifying.
Beware of over-justifying.
Remember that famous Shakespeare line, "The lady doth protest too much, methinks"? If you try to over-justify a character's negative traits, the reader's going to start becoming suspicious of that, and it's going to make them dislike the character more. You just need a little bit. You just need a little bit of justification. And the other thing I want to say is there are definitely exceptions.
Exception, genre considerations
To this rule. And those exceptions often happen in certain genres. If you are writing a horror story, say, sometimes absolute unconditional evil is the point of the story. Not every monster needs some sort of sad origin story to explain why they are evil. And sometimes pure malevolence can be more terrifying than explained malevolence. Hey, I hope that helps you write better characters. And also I want to say, I hope your novel projects are going well. Wherever you are, whether you're on chapter 1 or finishing it off or in the revision stage, I hope you are enjoying the process, and I hope that you're not stuck. And I hope that these videos in a small way help you along the journey. Happy writing.
Sweet. Good stuff.